Thank you. Okay, so it's got to do a little bit of tech stuff here. I'll move things out of the way. Just one sec. This is okay. All righty. So can everyone hear me online? It's just that. Cool. Okay. All right. Are we closing that door? Or?
Yeah, she just went to go test your audio. So if you want to talk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is audio good? Okay, cool. Thanks.
Just speak a little louder.
Louder?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll try and talk even louder. All right, cool. Welcome everybody to Finding Focus for Finals. Because we're about a week and a half until finals. How's everybody feeling? Not great. Okay. So today with this presentation, hopefully there'll be some new stuff. There could be some stuff you probably have heard before. But ideally there'll be some things, or at least give you some ideas or prompt you to try something new in getting ready for finals, finding focus, studying, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm Melissa Glass. I'm one of the doctoral psychology interns here at Texas State Counseling Center this year. So I've been here for both the fall and spring semester, and we'll be here through the summer as well. And the counseling center is open as well during the summer. So if anyone is enrolled in the summer, feel free to come with us, since this semester is almost done, but doesn't mean we're gone. So just welcome. All right, let's see if my clicker works. Yes. Okay. So things we will cover today. We'll have just a brief journal exercise. Excuse me, if you have pen and paper, great. If you want to do it digitally in your phone, that's fine too. I'll be very brief. I'll do a little overview of learning styles, the importance of sleep, which is something that I know comes up a lot, and we all know it. We still do a great job with it. Procrastination, managing stress, along with some grounding exercises. We won't necessarily do the grounding exercises today, but I'll give you guys a handout. And for those who are online, you'll get an email with everything, so don't worry. Creative study techniques, test-taking techniques for test anxiety, balancing finals with depression, and then some just interesting stuff, or at least I think interesting, around cognitive load and growth mindset, and some research behind it, which I just think is also just kind of interesting, especially kind of coming up with filling your brain with a lot of information during this time. Okay. All right, so the little journaling prompt, and I'm going to give you all about 5 minutes for this. So however you want to do it, as I said, if you want to do it digitally, you can. If you want to actually, put pen to paper, go for it. I'm just going to get my timer ready for 5 minutes. And so the things I want you to kind of just do a brief journaling on is thinking about how things went last semester in regards to finals and studying. So what went well, what didn't go well, what were you happy with the grades that resulted? How much work did you put in and over what period of time? So like when did you start studying, getting ready for finals? And then what would you like to change for this semester? So everyone ready for just doing a little journaling here? We can put 5 minutes on the clock and begin. Minutes left. And just 1 minute left. Start to kind of putting the thoughts together, and then we'll chat. Right. Okay, so for those online, pens down. All right, so just kind of put it out to the group here. What kind of came up for you while you were going through and thinking about this? Anybody feel free if you want to share on any part of this, what went well, what didn't, anything. Yes.
I guess an area I would like to improve in is actually committing to having like a set schedule for studying and then like taking a break and then like assignments and just like finding like a good balance that I could like that I'm able to like actually like stick to.
Totally. Great.
Like
Yeah.
just I guess be more organized.
Schedule is important. That will be coming up. Yes.
I mostly wrote down that I wanted to like fight against procrastinating because I do that a lot and it ends up being really stressful. So I wanted to learn like more techniques or ways to be more motivated on like staying on track towards like to what to do. So.
Perfect. Procrastination is huge. I have a lot of handouts on that, which I'll give at the end, and there's info on that too. So procrastination is a big one. Thank you. Anything else anybody want to share? Yes.
I feel like just looking at the overall semester, I started off pretty strong, and as the semester developed, I fell more into procrastination and stuff like that. So by the time finals came around, I was already pretty worn down, and so it kind of made it more difficult to focus on something. So
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Kind of reaching a point of burnout even before you've got into all to the meat of it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Pacing, huge part too. Totally. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. So we'll kind of start getting into some of this stuff, and some of these things that you guys mentioned will be coming up within this presentation. So first thing is there are different learning styles. And just by show of hands, do you have a sense of what your learning style is? Yes. What do you think yours is? Visual. Okay. Anyone else kind of have a sense? It's sometimes it can be more than one too. Yes.
I think I'm kinesthetic. Flashcards are like my favorite thing.
Yeah, totally. So it is important to have a sense of what your learning style is. And if you're really curious, there are actually quizzes, free quizzes online if you really want to kind of go out there and if you're not sure, which can be the case. But yeah, often you can be sometimes more than one, but usually you kind of lean more heavily towards one or the other. And these are sort of the big four. When you go online and you search learning styles, you might see like 8 or more, but these are kind of the big ones. So visual, as it sounds, retain information best by viewing pictures or graphs and images. Auditory, retains information after hearing it. Kinesthetic is more of this like learning by doing. a little more active, and then reading and writing, learning through words, whether that's by writing down or reading it. And the reason why these are so important is because then it also really factors into also how you study. And so they kind of, a lot of times when it comes to studying, it is a lot of times can be very specific to what your learning style is. And so you want to kind of really take note of what your learning style is, because then that can translate better in regards to how you're studying. And sometimes you might have to make a few tweaks and things to think about when you're going into this. So if you are more visual, you might have to do some more, maybe highlighting important key terms and colors. Colors might, be helpful for you. Replacing important words with symbols or initials. So it's kind of taking that and putting it into your learning style, and that could be kind of beneficial. Auditory, a lot of times recording, hearing things back, talking it out, having a discussion with others. So just even like you speaking it out and hearing it, reading your notes or assignments out loud, explaining them to your peers. Kinesthetic learning by doing, if you can redo lab experiments or projects, that can be really helpful. Flashcards, that they said, utilizing something tangible, even, pictures, photographs to illustrate your idea, things that are a little more in that active kind of way. And then reading and writing, a lot of times it's like writing things out, writing your words and notes, reword main ideas and principles to get a deeper understanding, and sometimes organizing diagrams and charts into statements and putting them into words. So that's just something that's kind of kicking these off, and just sort of important to know, what is your learning style, and then that can translate into how you study as well. It can be really beneficial to put those two together. Any questions on those? No. All right, so I'm going to kind of also kick things off with the importance of sleep, which we all know, but we don't do a good job with. And it is important. There's just no way around it. Sleep is very important. And not sleeping enough does impair all the skills you need for test taking, especially your ability to remember things and use logic. And they do have a lot of research on this, and that it accounts for almost 25% of the difference in overall academic performance in getting better sleep. And sometimes they say that sleeping after learning something improves your ability to remember it. And that can even apply to short naps. So sometimes, if you've just done a whole lot of studying and you kind of just need to take a break. Now, when it comes to naps, it don't need to be hours long, probably like 30 minutes or so at max, or else you're going to end up losing your day. But sometimes that can sometimes help to retain information, because that sleep and that rest for your brain is actually very important. It can even help to retain information, which is why it's part of being so important. And they say actually for the best academic performance, sleep well for the whole week leading up to the exam. Most people need about 7 to 10 hours. At the very least, though, sleep well the night before. So there is some planning involved in this, and that if you've got something big coming up and you know when they are by this point of when exams are during that week, of actually starting even more ahead than you think you need to, and get enough sleep and getting that rest, and then at the very least the night before. It is important. And sleeping regulates mood. So when you're overly anxious, it's hard to study. It's hard to perform well in an exam. And so because if you're not getting enough sleep, you can become more anxious. You can feel like the things that you had in your head are just leaving your head because of anxiety. So, one can't hammer home enough how important sleep is. I know it can be hard to do it, especially in college, but it is just that important. So I'm just going to continue to hammer that home of how important sleep is. All right, getting into procrastination, because this is a big one. I hear about this a lot. And it's a pretty vicious cycle. And I think it's pretty relatable for a lot of people. You kind of start off with your false security. It's not due for a while, you're fine. Then you can kind of get lazy. You could get a head start, but you're just going to wait. Kind of go into the excuses area. And there's the denial, where there's the sleep part. You're just going to kind of power through. And then you reach the crisis and you just kind of repeat, and round you go. Does this feel pretty relatable for some folks? Yeah. I think we've all done it in some capacity. It's just sometimes it really gets out of hand. So, so an action plan, and I'll be going through each of these a little bit. And then, as I said, there'll be handouts or I'll be emailing. But step 1, being aware and non-blaming. So this is the first step, is to stop and recognize your urge to procrastinate. Just having the awareness around that's what's happening, and not blaming yourself for it. It happens. Step 2, which I'll be going into on the next slide, is adjust unhelpful rules and assumptions. So we'll get into that, because it's kind of a broader topic. Step 3, practice tolerating discomfort. And that means if you can recognize the discomfort that is arising within you about doing the task or goal, You can practice tolerating it mindfully by just being aware and observing or watching the discomfort without judgment, making space for it, and hence letting it go when it's ready. Because it's going to be uncomfortable. Step 4, dismiss procrastination excuses and encourage. So you kind of look for the excuses you're making to justify your procrastination, and we'll do a little exercise on that of how you then kind of counter that excuse. And then step 5, we carry out practical strategies and then reflect and revise the plan as needed if you have to. So you can kind of go at procrastination with a game plan, which can actually feel more intentional than just letting it kind of take control of you, which procrastination often feels like it does. Okay, so unhelpful rules and assumptions. So the reason people procrastinate is because they hold unhelpful rules and assumptions about themselves or how the world works. And these unhelpful rules and assumptions often generate some form of discomfort about doing a task or goal, like anger, resentment, frustration, boredom, etc. And procrastination then becomes a strategy to avoid that discomfort. So these are some examples of unhelpful rules and assumptions that you might be familiar with or might come up for you. First one, needing to be in charge. Things should be done my way. I shouldn't have to do things I don't want to, or just because someone else says so. It's kind of a little bit against authority. Pleasure seeking. Life's too short to be doing things that are boring or hard. Fun should always come first. Fear of failure, disapproval. I feel like this is a big one. I must do things perfectly, otherwise I will fail, or others will think badly of me, or I just won't do it at all. I feel like that one comes up a lot. Fear of uncertain catastrophe. I feel like this one comes up a lot. I must be certain of what will happen. What if it's bad? I'm better at just not doing anything than risking it, and kind of letting the anxiety sort of take over, and that it's better just not to do it at all. Low self-confidence, I hear that one too. I can't do it, I'm just too incapable and inadequate. And depleted energy. I can't do things when I'm stressed, fatigued, unmotivated, or depressed. I just don't do it. Anyone but kind of relate with any of these? Yeah, and that really stand out for you? I know you mentioned procrastination, I'm gonna put you on the spot, but.
It's supposed to like this is the depleted energy one. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm too tired. I'll do it later when I have like more energy. But then you never have more energy.
Right. Yeah, I feel like this is ones like I see a lot of, and yeah, definitely that's a big one. So, questions to ask yourself when you're kind of feeling, when you're sort of addressing some of the unhelpful rules and assumptions or trying to figure out which ones are happening to you, is you sort of ask, once you kind of have this and you can kind of put a name to it, you can be like, oh, I'm feeling the depleted energy assumption. You can be like, what is the unhelpful rule or assumption I would like to adjust? Okay, so you can name it. Then where did this rule or assumption come from? So this is like a little bit of a kind of a thinking back. This comes from something when I was a kid. Did teacher say something? Was there a life event? Because sometimes these things actually come from a while ago. It's not necessarily just all of a sudden that you started having these, because typically procrastination, how you act's been going for some time. So doing a little thinking on like, where did it actually come from? And maybe, thinking back to when did this kind of begin, and was there anything around it? And so oftentimes when you can kind of look back on that, you can kind of have like a bit of an aha moment of like, oh, that's when that all began, or that teacher said that thing, and now I've been feeling this way about myself. Who knows what it is. So thinking on that. And then, in what ways is this rule or assumption unreasonable, unrealistic, unfair, or unhelpful? And then what are the negative consequences of having this rule or assumption? Oftentimes it's not getting the work done. And then what is an alternative, more helpful, balanced, flexible, realistic rule or assumptions to kind of counter it with something that's a little more realistic? And then what can I do to put this rule or assumption into practice on a daily basis, the new one? So that's some things there with kind of the unhelpful rules and assumptions. So going into the excuses part of it, these usually involve some grain of truth. Not completely wrong when you're coming up with the excuse in of itself about the current situation that you're facing. But then we conclude that we're better off postponing the task or goal to another time. So these excuses make us feel that our procrastination is justified, reasonable, acceptable, and okay. As such, the excuses play a big role in leading us to procrastinate, and we need to learn how to dismiss them. So it's kind of helpful to make a little chart like this, and you label it the truth, your first unhelpful conclusion, and then you counter it with something helpful. So some examples. The truth, I have other things to do. There's probably a lot of truth in that. Unhelpful conclusion, I will do the assignment once those things are finished. Helpful conclusion, but they are not more important and can be done after this assignment. So especially if there's something that's feeling like a little bit harder or it's going to take you more time, usually putting that one first and then getting to the other ones. I have plenty of time, so I don't have to start it now, but better to get on top of it now than leave it to the last minute. So I'd like us to try to do one together. So can someone come up with a truth? Could be anything. Any truths that come up for you on something that, an excuse that you make? Yes,
I'm exhausted.
I'm exhausted. Okay. Exhausted, what would be an unhelpful conclusion of the exhaustion? Okay, and what could be a helpful conclusion?
Feel a lot better after. I finish this.
Yeah, after I finish this, or at least do, give yourself an amount. Give yourself, I'll do half. Then I'll maybe reward myself with a nap and I'll do the other half, which I get up after 30 minutes, something like that. So it's just kind of going through kind of something different, right? This is going to feel different for you to have to do an exercise for an exercise you're trying to get done. So it feels like there might be like extra work there, but ideally it won't, because the goal is to encourage yourself rather than criticize. So you really want to actually kind of boost yourself and be like, no, I got this. I'm going to take my nap. I'm going to try and get half of this done, because otherwise, it might just never happen. And I'm going to just at least do that. So it's kind of just trying to kind of go through a little bit of a process here, really kind of thinking this through, and that you can really actually encourage yourself versus criticize yourself and not get it done. So there is some like believing in yourself in that too. Okay, so then what can you do? So you can begin with to-do lists and prioritize the tasks, and then it's very helpful to break each task down into manageable chunks. And how to approach each task, these are some ideas. Now, there's quite a few here, and I'm going to go through each one. And really the goal is to, keep in mind that not all these are suited for every person or every situation. So we'll take a bit of trial and error to see what works for you in different situations. You might have to switch things up sometimes. But some ideas are kind of what I was saying before, the worst first. You knock out the worst task first, all the other tasks after that seem easy by comparison. You use momentum. You start doing a task that you like and that actually energizes you. Maybe there's a class you actually really enjoy, and the assignments too. And then without a break, you quickly switch to a task that you've been putting off. So you kind of actually get like excited and energized, and you kind of transition pretty quickly into something that might kind of suck. Just 5 minutes. Plan to spend 5 minutes on the task. And this is such a small amount of time, you will feel you can tolerate just 5 minutes. And at the end of that, you reassess and see if you can spend just another 5 minutes on the task, and so on. And actually, I'll be giving you another resource that kind of falls into that, of like these kind of timing kind of things that could be really helpful in kind of breaking things up. Setting time limits, kind of in that sort of that same vein. You set a specific amount of time to work on a task, like 30 minutes. You stick to just that, and rather than extending things, even if you feel as you can. So you just kind of give yourself that 30, and then you stop after that 30 minutes, then you kind of reassess to see where you are. Prime time. So this is working out what time of day you're most productive or energized or creative, and using this time to get started on your tasks or goal. And the idea is to attempt tasks when you're at your optimum. So if it's first thing in the morning, if it's right after you've had dinner, maybe it's during lunch, whatever it might be, but it's kind of trying to figure out when is your prime time of energy, and really kind of, at least during a stressful time like this, to really to focus on that time, and similarly your prime place. So where there's the least amount of distractions, and kind of being aware of the types of environments that you tend to get more work done, and what those look like for you. Maybe it is the library, maybe it's not necessarily the library. So it's kind of finding what those are. And so prime time and prime place kind of can like go together. Remember then do. As soon as you remember you need to do a task, seize the moment and follow through on it. So don't wait. That's kind of another method. Reminders. If you often forget tasks, use visual reminders and prompts to help you, placing notes or lists in prominent places, like the fridge, bathroom mirror, program reminders on your phone, things that'll pop up. Visualize, use imagery to clearly visualize a task being successfully completed in your mind, and use the momentum for the visualization to get going on the task in real life. Focus, if you're feeling unsettled, take a moment to close your eyes and focus on your breath. I'll be giving some ground exercise that can kind of fall into this, and try to lengthen out each breath in and out. and spend 5 to 10 minutes doing that until you can focus and resettle and get back into the task. And that's totally okay. And then plan rewards. And I think that's probably one of my favorites, in that you do reward yourself after doing something. The more you reward yourself for small achievements, the less you'll feel like you're missing out or being deprived. Hence, you would potentially procrastinate less. So rewards actually can be really helpful, and that can be anything. That can be hanging out with friends. That can be going and getting, I don't know, boba tea. I don't know, whatever you like or do. Just get creative with it, especially right now. Feel okay about giving yourself a reward if you get the task done. If you don't feel like you're wasting your time by rewarding yourself, that's part of it. So that's something I hear a lot too. Okay. And so I'll be providing the handouts for this at the end, but each one will go through what is procrastination, the vicious cycle, dismissing those excuses we were talking about, some practical strategies and helpful rules and assumptions, tolerating the discomfort and action plans. So today in this presentation, we kind of just gave you like a very high level on it all. So I'll encourage you afterwards, I'll give you the handouts and kind of try to deep dive a little bit more and find what works for you. Any questions on any of that? No, everyone good? Okay. All righty. So we're going to transition just a little bit into managing stress and things you can do. And there it is, stay on a schedule. It is top of mind, and it does really help, because when you are on a schedule, it does help you feel that at least you know what's coming up and what you're doing, especially at a time like this when things are just so busy. Even if at other times in your life, like when you're in the summer, you just relax, you don't have it, totally fine. But when you're in it, in the thick of it right now, a schedule can be really beneficial. And a schedule during this exam or finals time might look different to the next one. But at least once you kind of figure out sort of what works for you, it can be very helpful. And that usually looks like getting up at around the same time, getting your exercise in, eating around the same time, going to bed around the same time. So kind of trying to stay on it. We all have our phone, our phone. I'm totally guilty of this. Limiting your scrolling your screen time on your phone, especially before bed. I could go into a whole thing, because that's something that I'm actually very interested in and have studied around phone usage. And there's ways in which you can put into grayscale. You can put into bedtime mode. You can put into focus mode. You can monitor what your usage is. There's a lot of ways in which, especially maybe just during exam time, for the next couple of weeks, your phone goes on to grayscale at 10 p.m. I swear it actually makes a huge difference, because Reels and TikToks don't look nearly as cool when there's no color in them. It's actually kind of worse. It's just an idea. Reducing caffeine and alcohol during the week. You can treat yourself on the weekend. And caffeine comes up later, and that it's actually kind of counterintuitive. Like you might think, oh, this will boost me, wake me up and get me energized and ready. But actually, especially if you have any kind of anxiety, it's actually going to increase that. It's going to make you very jittery. And it's actually going to make things harder, which is why it then comes back to having good sleep. So ideally you won't need as much caffeine. So it all kind of works together. See how that is? Eating healthy. Can't stress that enough. Reducing carbs and processed foods, particularly. I know at college that can be hard. It's much easier to get ramen and other things and pizza, and it is. But if you can, put some veggies in there, get a little, try and balance out those carbs and things as best you can, because they just burn up really quickly, and you actually get depleted energy much faster versus having healthier foods that stick around a little longer and actually keep you a little more energized. Connect with people you care about. I can't stress that enough. Like, don't isolate. That's actually, I know you think, oh, I have to go study the away for a while, and you might, but then come back out of your studying hole and go and connect with people you care about. And that in of itself, just having that connection and, joining together on the fact that this is hard, as you're struggling, you can relate to that. That in of itself actually is also we're social creatures. We need it. So don't forget about that part, even though you're really in the thick of just trying to get through these next couple weeks. Doing some form of physical activity for at least 30 minutes a day. That can be as easy as just going for a walk, jumping jacks in your room, whatever it is. But it is important, and it's just something to kind of get the yayas out when you're just sort of like, in the midst of all this and just probably sitting for a while trying to focus. Very helpful to get up and do something. And then the grounding techniques. And I'll be giving you, it's very hard to read, so don't even try. But I'll be giving you this as a handout. And so you'll be able to kind of go through it and see, but there's sort of I like how they put it into these different categories of like using your body, calming yourself physically, distracting yourself, coming back to your senses. And so, and within each of these, they have like a few examples of different kinds of ground activities you can try. And again, there could be some trial and error here. Different situations might call for different activities. So try to have fun with it and try different things. But there's a lot of options, a lot of different things you can do, and they can really help with just the management of stress and also that focusing as well. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. On to some creative study techniques. So again, what works for one person may be entirely different for another. So keep that in mind. The auditory folks going on walks while listening to your recorded lectures, that might be really helpful and really nice. And then also you get your activity in there. So it's kind of like 2 in 1, which is pretty cool. The Pomodoro technique. So this is one that I was sort of hinting at before, which is the timing. So this sort of goes in kind of in line with like that scheduling and being like really more structured about your studying. And there is this website, funny name, Tomato Timer, that just kind of does the timing for you. Because step 1 is you pick a task. Step 2 is you set a 25-minute timer. Step 3 is that you work on the task until that time is up. You take a 5-minute break, and then you go through this, and you call it, this is a Pomodoro, and you go through this every 4 times, and then you take a longer 15-30-minute break. And you basically just kind of, it's a method for staying focused and mentally fresh, and you just kind of go through sort of these series of Pomodoros. And people have found this to be really helpful because it's really structured, and that it allows you to not get super worn out when you do it. So that's one thing that has been helpful for some folks, this Pomodoro technique. And as I said, the Tomato Timer kind of just like does all the timing for you, just like press go and it does it all for you. The other one that I like this is also very blurry and hard to see, is the Eisenhower matrix. And so basically you look at all the different tasks that you have, and sometimes, just making one big to-do list can seem really overwhelming. So then you want to kind of chunk it even more, and you can put it into these different quadrants, and there's 4 of them. So there's the urgent and important. So that's the do it category. There's no way around it. That is where, there are clear and defined deadlines and consequences if you don't take action. And so this is, finishing a project, submitting work, responding to emails. It's like the stuff that's urgent and needs to happen. You can't actually wait on it. Then the next quadrant, it's not urgent, yet it's still important. And so for that one, it's activities without a set deadline. So for these, they'll bring you, these can technically kind of fall into the easy to procrastinate on, but it's where you kind of can fall into actually doing strategic planning, any professional development. So things that kind of come here that might be not urgent and important. So it's not quite in the do it category. It can be scheduled, but not forgotten, right? And then there's the urgent and not important, and that's actually my favorite quadrant because that's the one if you can delegate it. You can give it, you can punt it to somebody else if you can, because it doesn't necessarily. It's things that need to be done, but don't require necessarily your specific skills. It's like busy work is kind of where that one falls in. So maybe if you're in a group project or something and you can kind of see all the different things you guys have to do, this could be the part where you're like, actually, I think that person can do this because I think actually I need to go take care of this because this for me is the more important side. So thinking about that, don't try and take everything on yourself, especially if you have any stuff with groups or things like that. This is the one where you can just really think about what can I cut, what can I delegate? And then the not urgent, not important, that's the stuff that if you can, delete it. And yes, social media falls into here. And watching TV and video games. Not saying that you don't want to do it at all, but it definitely kind of falls into, especially just during this crunch time, the not as important category. The category, if you need to delete it at times, you can, so that you can put your more focus into the urgent category or the do it category or box, whatever. So that's the Eisenhower matrix. And for each of these, would you search for them online and you'll find plenty of examples of stuff if you need any extra resources on that. Some other creative study techniques, writing things down does tend to be better than typing. So I know a lot of us are pretty digital these days, which would be great. But if it's like you're taking notes that you've been typing in class and you actually want to try and retain it, they do say that if you actually kind of put pen to paper and write it out, it's another way of inputting it into your brain, which can be very helpful. Because the idea is you want to input the information into your brain in different ways. The more ways that you do it, the more that your brain kind of takes it in all these different ways and can retain it better. So things like drawing, as I was talking about, talking out loud, writing it out. So trying to think about different ways you can do it, especially if it's something you're having a hard time memorizing. And then, yeah, then there's the, you can make a list of what you need to learn and order group it accordingly. And then that can also kind of go back to some of the things we talked about within the procrastination, how to then attack that list. Okay. Let's see, how long time? We're good. Okay. Next is actually going into the test taking. And so there's test anxiety and test taking strategies. I mean, how are people here with the actual test? Are you guys good with the actual testing, or do you get anxious for testing? Sort of anxious for testing? Okay. Yeah, is that a yes for you, or kind of? Okay.
Depends on the subject.
Yeah, okay. So some people get a lot of test anxiety. So there's a whole like studying getting ready portion, and actually coming to the test itself can cause a lot of anxiety. This was when I did this was done where you could either do it online, and now it's kind of like online or in person. So that's why it's like tune in the class, but obviously it's arrive at class, but arriving early. So just and avoiding last minute tech difficulties if you're online, or if you're in person, just like trying to find where you're going or where you're going to sit, just so you can come in, you can kind of relax and settle into the space a little bit better, versus that you're rushing and you're already stressed because you're rushing. You want to try and avoid as much extraneous stress as you possibly can on the test taking day. So really try and plan ahead as best you can in getting there, so that you don't have to deal with anything more than just the test itself. Scan, then start with what's easy. Oftentimes they say that if it helps to answer those questions first, then go back to the ones you don't know. And some of these things you may have already heard or do already, so it could be a little repetitive, but if not, then about that. This is where I was talking about the little to no caffeine. Because it often increase those anxiety jitters, so get a good night's sleep instead. And that's why people think it's like counterintuitive, like you need the caffeine to wake up, but it can have this adverse effect and actually can make you too jittery and too anxious. And then that actually causes more problems if you don't feel like you can actually like sit still and get through this exam. So being careful with the caffeine. And then reducing stimulus. So don't try and bounce around too much. Don't scroll down instantly or rush. Kind of doing like the one question at a time and getting through it just easily. You want to kind of reduce the stimulus, which I'll be getting into a little bit in regards to like cognitive load, and that your brain actually, if you load your brain up with too much stimulus, it's actually going to start performing not as well. So that'll come in a little bit, but just kind of thinking about it. And then before we get into that, this does come up is balancing finals with depression. Depression is pretty common and not anything to be ashamed of. And sometimes we might even just have down moments. It might not even be, fully clinically depressed, but just moments in which we're just really struggling. And during these times, focusing on food and sleep is important. That comes up a lot, and it just is important. Changing your environment on study breaks, going outside, especially with the weather actually still being decent, walking or stretching. So just kind of changing things up. Like I said, not isolating, being with friends. These can just be really, really beneficial, even though you're kind of in the thick of it and trying to be a hermit to get things done. It's like actually getting out there is really beneficial. Asking yourself, when during each day do I seem to have the most energy? Then plan ahead of time to study during those periods. And for folks who are feeling down or for going through periods of down or periods of depression, this could be something that's really helpful for them, because sometimes it is when they wake up, or it's like certain parts of day when they're maybe going to have lunch or eat or whatever it might be. And but just in general, it's sort of this question is just very important of asking when you have those energy and really capitalizing on that time, versus when you're really exhausted and tired after a long day and you just can't actually focus as well. And yes, plug for us, consider seeing a counselor at the counseling center. Because especially during times like that, don't wait, come talk, come see us. And before things kind of get worse. So it's just more of like acknowledging, times can be hard, you can have these down periods. So just being sure to address that. All right. So before we kind of get into all my like sciencey things, which I think are very interesting. Oh, I didn't switch my order. Maybe actually to this one first. How are things sitting with people anything new that you heard, or is this all just like, oh yeah, I've done all, everyone's told me that before? Or how's this all kind of landing for you guys?
A lot of the information for me at least is actually pretty new and like
Okay.
things that I haven't thought about before. So
Cool,
I
cool.
think it's exciting.
Okay, great. Awesome. Neat. Yeah, because I mean, I think every time people are like, you need to sleep more, and everyone's like, I know, but it's so hard to do it, but it is just so important. So these next couple slides are things I'm kind of going to go into. It's a little sciencey. I find it just very interesting, and it's just kind of about like thinking about kind of how your brain works, and how we intake information. And I bring it up because there's actually been a lot of research on this and like how we input information and things around cognitive load that I think just even for like teachers teaching to students is just as important in how then when we need to teach ourselves and input information into our brains or get information to be to retain that information. So hopefully this won't be like too heady, but yeah, I'll try to explain as best I can. So this is the information processing model. And basically, it's a series of steps that explain how the brain acquires, processes, and stores information. And this theory tries to explain how the brain processes information, creates memories, or as you know, you guys do kind of retain the information. And it states that the brain is very similar to a computer in the way that it processes information. And just like a computer, the human brain receives various types of information and can store it, and also then can retrieve it. So the sensory memory is a very brief memory that allows people to retain impressions of sensory information after the original stimulus has gone away. And it's kind of also often thought as like the first stage. So it's like pretty brief, up to 3 seconds of memory when kind of gets inputted. And it's registering just like a lot of information in the environment, but only for a very brief period of time. And the purpose is to retain information long enough for it to just be recognized. If it then does get recognized and it's got your attention, then it's going to go into your working memory. And from there, it's a form of memory that allows a person to temporarily hold a limited amount of information at the ready for immediate mental use. So then you can kind of like regurgitate this information pretty quickly. And it works out what new information is all about and whether to store it to long-term or discard it. So is it important or is it not? So, so sensory is kind of taking in like a bunch of inputs, sort of weeding out what's actually needed, put it into working memory, and then working memory is going, okay, am I going to actually encode this or am I going to get rid of it? And by the time you get into long-term, that sort of memories are stored over an extended period of time, and it can be memories from an hour ago, from decades earlier. So this is just sort of kind of how we process, but that kind of leads into the part that I think is interesting, which is the cognitive load. And so cognitive load is basically, it relates to the amount of information that working memory can hold at one time. And since it has very limited capacity, like we were just saying, that you should avoid overloading it with additional activities that don't directly contribute to learning in of itself. So much in the same way as having too many windows open on your computer, it reduces its capability to work properly. So if you have too many tabs open, oftentimes your computer kind of slows down. So thinking about it, that your brain actually kind of does this too. So with that, you want to decrease the stimulus. And so a lot of times it's reducing distractions that make it harder for us to focus. So for you guys, if you often have, I don't know, like the TV on in the background, you've got your music playing as well or something. You've got people maybe talking very loudly, you go to a place that it feels like it's hard that there's just a lot of stimulus. Your brain is taking in all these stimuli, and it does make it harder for it to kind of weed through all the different stimuli that you have in order to focus on the one you're trying to take in, which is what you have in front of you, your book or whatever it is that you're trying to get the information. So it's sort of thinking about how much stimulus do you have around you, because your brain will start to take it all in and actually make it harder for it to focus on whatever it is you're trying to study. So that's the decreasing the stimulus. And then there's the simplified part, and breaking complex assignments into smaller sequence chunks. As we've been saying, that's why it's so important. And then bringing them together to provide the whole picture. And so they say that given that the goal of learning is to move new information from the working memory into the long term, the cognitive load theory suggests that instructional materials and environments should be designed to reduce this load, thus removing distractions and enable more efficient passage of the desired learning into the working memory and to the long-term memory. So an example they sometimes give about like how your brain kind of works and with this decreasing of stimulus is because our brains in general, like we seek puzzles, like we like to kind of solve and figure things out. But for example, I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but I've had it to me, like when you're driving and you're getting close to the destination, you've got your GPS going, but like you're also like trying to kind of see where the address is. And I don't know, I've done this and I'll like turn the music down because also I'm trying to focus. And I'm like, where the hell is that place? That's you reducing stimulus. So thinking about, so if you think about in that way, in which like you do that, even just almost unconsciously, like I can't have the stimulus because I'm trying to focus. Same things when you're trying to focus on the work that you're trying to study. So think about that whenever, wherever you are, whatever you decide, your prime place of studying, your brain, that's what our brain does. We seek puzzles, we take in a bunch of stimuli, but you have to turn it down sometimes in order to focus on whatever it is you're trying to get to. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah. So I think it's really interesting because basically just saying that there is a cognitive load, and that if we put in too much, we actually can't then take in more information, or it makes it harder, it makes it a lot harder. So I just find that really interesting. And finally, growth mindset. You may have heard about this too. And there's kind of the mantra, if you label, you limit. But basically, there has been research on this. They called it a stereotype threat. And there was an actual research article about this study that basically they had a group of women, or two groups of women, I should say. And the women were randomly assigned to two groups. And one set were told they were being tested to see why men generally do better on math than women. And the other group was simply told they were part of an experiment on math performance. What happened was the women reported being distracted by thoughts such as, I thought about how men are usually better than women at math, so I was trying harder not to make mistakes, and in turn they did more poorly. Versus the women not given the stereotype message, their performance actually improved slightly. So basically, the takeaway from that is, if you think about your abilities in a certain way, like you're bad at math, you might actually start to kind of act like you are. It's not to say that, I mean, if you have, if you do struggle with things, you do, but if you start to think that if you start to really doubt your abilities, in this case, where these women are actually told, oh, it's because men are better at math, they actually started to kind of perform in that direction versus just performing as good as they felt they could. So positive self-talk is essential, and it really is actually very important. And also just knowing that your brain is constantly creating new synapse connections. So basically, you're capable of learning new things throughout your life. This is ongoing. So whenever you're in doubt and you're like, oh, I'm never gonna remember this, I can't remember all this, I can't take anything new in, your brain is actually highly capable and will be capable for many, many moons to come. And there is just a lot of it that, if you label, you limit, and to really, I mean, for lack of a better way to put it, believing in yourself. But there actually has been research on this, and that if you literally do put a label on someone, they are going to actually perform differently. So really trying to kind of do that positive self-talk when going through this, and it actually can make a difference. And I believe that's it. So any questions as I get your little handouts ready? Feel free to happy with them. Or comments or.
If you have any last minute questions for those of you on Zoom, if you'll just drop them into the Q&A function. Otherwise, this concludes the end of our presentation. When you close out of the browser, it's going to automatically take you to a survey. And if you will complete that for us, that will be great.
Feedback is pretty helpful. It's also a sense of, we want these kinds of presentations again or not. This helps us know what you guys are looking for. That's cool. So I'm giving you these handouts on procrastination along with the grounding techniques you do. But for everything that I was kind of showing today, there's a lot of information online, so feel free to dig in.
People on Zoom, will they get the handout?
I wouldn't know. Yeah. I'll send it all like the PDF or something. Obviously,